I'm a college student juggling the arduous process of writing my thesis. The procedure has been strenuous, long nights of reading, writing, and rewriting, with tension hanging on me every day. However, I couldn't have foreseen that the real challenge would not stem from the academic grind, but rather from an unexpected event occurring right in my home. Make sure to subscribe to my channel so I can keep giving you intriguing, genuine tales like these. Don't forget to watch this video till the conclusion and like the video, because this narrative is going to be fascinating. Please click the like button to express your support. It all started on a fairly normal Friday night. After burning the midnight oil for days, I eventually trudged home, worn out and desperate for sleep. When I stepped in, the house was silent. The warm glow from the kitchen light poured into the corridor, producing lengthy shadows. "Logan, is this you?" My stepmother Evelyn cried out from the kitchen, disturbing the hush in the home. "Yeah, it's me," I murmured back, my voice raspy with tiredness as I dragged myself into the kitchen. CLA was standing at the stove, stirring something that smelled good. My father, Thomas, was sitting at the table, reading the paper as usual. He looked up from his reading glasses and observed, "You look beat." I offered him a sleepy grin and ran my hand through my unruly hair. "I'm struggling with this thesis," I groaned. CL glanced away from the stove, her face furrowed with alarm. "Have you been eating correctly? You appear pallid." I nodded, but my stomach growled loudly. CLA gave a gentle laugh. "Sit down, supper is almost ready. I appreciate that. But I believe I'll simply go to bed." "I'm utterly exhausted," I remarked, shaking my head. "Are you certain?" CLA inquired, her brow pinched with concern. "You should eat something." "I'm sure," I answered, backing toward the steps. "I just need to sleep, okay?" A pleasant night then, I heard them both shout out as I ascended the stairs to my room. When I slumped into my bed, sleep overwhelmed me immediately. I'm not sure how much time elapsed before I became aware of a presence in my room. In my half-asleep condition, I attempted to tell myself it was all a bizarre dream, but suddenly I felt someone, softly stroke my hand. My fatigued brain strained to comprehend what was going on. I felt my shirt being raised gently, and something cold touched my skin. The jolt stiffened my body, but I was so exhausted and anxious for sleep that I couldn't force myself to open my eyes or move. What happened next still feels surreal, like a moment caught in time. Yet, it is an experience I will never forget. A hand began softly caressing me in ways that were clearly unacceptable for a family member. My body responded automatically. Despite my mind's perplexity and dread, my mind raced with questions. What was going on? Was this real? Was I dreaming? I wanted to speak out and ask what was going on, but I couldn't. The weight of tiredness kept me immobile and immobilized. Part of me wished it was all just a vivid, unpleasant dream, but the touch, the emotion, was too vivid and strong to be anything but reality. It continued, becoming more personal with each passing instant. My heart hammered in my chest, and to my immense dismay, my body betrayed me. I was reacting to the contact. Despite my head screaming that it was wrong, it stopped just when I felt I couldn't take it any longer. Just as I was about to force myself up to face what was going on, I heard faint footsteps fade into the distance, silence. My heart pounded in my ears and my mind raced. What just happened? Who had been inside my room? I wanted to get up and explore, but my body was still too heavy from tiredness. Before I knew it, I'd fallen back into a deeply disturbed slumber. When I awoke the next morning, the events of the previous night seemed remote, like a hazy, haunted recollection. Had it actually happened, or had my stressed-out mind created a weird fantasy? My gut wrenched as I staggered downstairs, still sleepy and disoriented. The scent of fresh coffee and bacon permeated the air, taking me to the kitchen, where CLA was, working on the stove. "Good morning, sleepyhead." She gave me a charming grin. "You must have really needed the rest. How do you feel?" I gazed at her for a long time, hoping to find any indication that things had shifted between us, but she appeared absolutely normal, humming as she flipped pancakes on the griddle as if nothing had occurred. "I am okay," I said, my voice soft and cautious. "Where is Dad?" "Oh, he had an early appointment with a client," CLA explained, laying a plate of food in front of me. "Eat up. You'll need your strength for all that studying." But despite her nonchalant demeanor, I couldn't escape the impression that something was wrong. CLA bustled around the kitchen, discussing her plans for the day, but I scarcely heard her. My thoughts were focused on the happenings of the previous night. Had it actually happened, and if it had, was CLA the one who entered my room? I did not want to inquire. What did I do? Was it a mistake to bring this up? The notion of accusing my stepmother of something so wrong made my stomach turn. I quickly completed my meal, expressed my gratitude to Evelyn, and made my way back to my room. Sitting at my computer, I attempted to concentrate on my thesis, but the memories of those touches, whether real or imagined, kept interfering with my thoughts. The next 3 days passed quickly as I struggled to balance my academic work with the internal turmoil. Every time I saw CLA, I felt embarrassed, curious, and guilty, but she acted as if nothing had occurred. Things didn't really get going until the following Friday. I had left class early and raced home to work on my thesis defense, which was planned for the following day. I was so focused on my job that I didn't hear CLA enter my room. Logan, she spoke gently, shocking me. Sorry, I did not intend to surprise you. I've brought you some nibbles. You've been working really hard. I turned to face her, my pulse racing. She was standing there with a tray of cookies, beaming at me as usual. But something in her eyes seemed off, or was I dreaming things? Thank you, I replied, my voice shaking as I took the dish from her. Instead of leaving, CLA perched on the side of my bed. How is the thesis going? She inquired, her voice mild. It's okay, I said, trying to maintain my composure. Composer. I'm mainly concerned about the defense tomorrow. Her expression became softer with pity. Oh, honey, you are going to do fantastic. You've worked so hard. CLA approached faster than I could react. Her hand rested on my shoulder. The contact jolted me, bringing back memories of that night. I could not handle it anymore. CLA, I murmured, my voice shaking. That night, were you in my room? The instant the words left my mouth, I saw a shift in her expression. The smile faded, replaced by disbelief, then remorse. Logan, she said, her voice barely audible, I'm not sure what to say. And at that moment, I knew it had not been a dream. It had actually occurred. CLA had entered my room that night and caressed me in ways that transcended all boundaries. She finally broke the stillness, saying, "We need to talk." I nodded, and her eyes welled up with unshed tears. "We do, just not right now. Dad will be home shortly, and you should concentrate on your thesis defense. Can we speak afterward?" I wanted to protest and demand answers right then, but she was correct. I could not afford to be sidetracked by this when my whole academic destiny was at stake. Okay, I agreed hesitantly. The next day I had my thesis defense, but reality had already begun to destroy what I believed I understood. The morning of my thesis defense dawned with conflicting sensations of excitement and trepidation. On the one hand, I was excited to deliver the study I had worked so hard on for months, hoping it would pay off. However, I couldn't escape the uneasiness and tension that was gnawing at me, knowing that an awkward, unfinished talk awaited me at home. I scarcely tasted the meal CLA had cooked for me. My stomach clenched in knots as I glanced at the meal in front of me, attempting to appear normal despite my racing thoughts. CLA walked around the kitchen with an air of forced cheerfulness, attempting to preserve the illusion that everything was okay, but I could see through it, the strain in her eyes. The weight of everything she was carrying inside, and the thesis defense itself, all blurred together. I presented my study, addressed committee questions, and defended my findings. I somehow managed to ignore the emotional turmoil in my life and concentrate on the work at hand. Somehow, I emerged from it with a sense of accomplishment. Logan did an excellent job. My advisor replied with a pleasant smile. You should be proud of yourself. Instead of being euphoric, I had a terrible feeling of dread as I made my way home. I couldn't escape the uneasy sensation that everything was going to blow. CLA was seated at the kitchen table with 2 mugs of hot coffee. Her face was a mask of tension and sorrow. She glanced up as I stepped in, but her face softened into one of concern. "How did it go?" she asked quietly, her voice scarcely rising above a whisper. "Fine," I answered, my voice tense and hesitant to participate in any discussion. "Logan," she responded, her tone tinged with relief and regret. "I knew you'd do well. Can we speak now?" I couldn't keep it in any longer. The facade of normalcy was eroding, and I couldn't ignore the weight in my chest. "We need to discuss what occurred," I added, my voice strong. Clay nodded slowly, her shoulders slumped. "You're correct. Please sit down." I pulled out a chair and sat across from her, my hands wrapped around the steaming mug of coffee she had prepared for me. We did not speak for a long time. It seemed as if we were each waiting for the other to end the stillness, to speak the words that had been hanging in the air for days. I finally spoke, unable to keep quiet any longer. "Why did you enter my room that night?" I inquired, my voice trembling despite my efforts to sound tough. CLA closed her eyes for a moment to calm herself. When she reopened them, her eyes found me, filled with remorse and grief. "Lo, I don't have a decent response," she murmured, her voice shaking. "I keep asking myself the same question, yet I can't deny what happened." Her fingers skimmed the rim of her mug hesitantly. "The reality is that I've been battling for a long time. Your father is a kind man, but he's been rather distant recently, constantly working and focused. I've been feeling lonely, underappreciated, and desperate. That night, I had overindulged in wine, causing my emotions to be wildly scattered. I thought maybe we could discuss, but when I then arrived in your room, you were already asleep, and I'm not sure what happened to me." She paused for a time, drawing a nervous breath. "You were quiet and pleasant, and before I knew it, I was doing things I should not have done." I sat there, unable to absorb her words. Part of me wanted to strike out, accusing her of breaching my confidence, but I also saw the agony in her eyes. The regret threatened to engulf her. It was a complex sensation, a mix of fury and pity. "I'm very sorry, Logan," she said softly, tears flowing down her cheeks. "What I did was wrong. I have broken your confidence. And if you want me to go, I will. I will understand." The idea of her leaving in our family disintegrating shook me deeply. Despite all that had occurred, despite the agony and confusion that swirled inside me, I knew that I did not want her to leave. I spoke softly, my voice wavering. "I don't know how to proceed. How can I trust you after all this?" CLA stared at me, her expression a combination of hope and worry. "I'm not sure either," she acknowledged gently, "but I want to try. Henry, if you're willing, I'll do whatever it takes to make things right." We chatted for hours, working through our emotions and being honest about our sentiments. Claire talked further about her loneliness and how her marriage had made her feel abandoned, while I talked about my perplexity and the unusual combination of feelings her acts had triggered in me. As we talked, I began to understand her better, not in the sense of justifying what had occurred, but in the sense of recognizing her as a person, not just a stepmother. "What are we going to tell Dad?" I inquired as the talk began to wind down. CLA sighed deeply, her face filled with grief. "I do not know. Part of me feels he deserves to know the truth, but another part of me is concerned about the consequences for our family." I nodded, slowly, feeling the burden of the choice on my shoulders. The secret between us had become a heavy burden, and I could understand Claire's trepidation. "Maybe," I answered after a pause, "we don't have to tell him everything. But we should talk about the important concerns, your sentiments of neglect and the gap between you two. That could be sufficient." Claire stared at me with cautious optimism in her eyes. "Do you think that will help?" "I'm not sure." I responded honestly. "Maybe it will, at least. Partially. It may keep something like this from happening again." We made the decision to approach the situation day by day. Claire would work on strengthening her communication with Thomas, while I would focus on finishing my academic work. We both agreed to be more transparent. As CLA stood up to begin making supper, she paused and looked at me with a mix of thanks and lingering regret. She thanked Logan for listening. "I don't hate you," I told her frankly. "I'm still digesting things, but I don't hate you," she said with a weak grin before going back to the stove to finish cooking. That night, while I lay in bed, my thoughts relived our talk. I felt a curious mix of emotional relief from clearing the air and continued bewilderment about my own sentiments. I couldn't shake the feeling of shame for agreeing to keep some of what happened to secret. The following several weeks were filled with unsettling anxiety. Claire and I were hyper-aware of one another, keeping a polite distance and unsure of how to react. We both plunged ourselves into our different routines, with me concentrating on homework and CLA attempting to reconnect with Thomas. However, the weight of the secret continued to hang over us. One day, I came home from class early to find Claire alone in the house. She was cuddled up on a couch with a book, appearing surprised as I strolled in. "I didn't expect you to be home so early," she replied, her voice full of astonishment. "The professor canceled class," I stated, standing awkwardly in the doorway. "Where is Dad?" I asked. CLA answered, frustrated. "Working late again?" I could tell how exhausted she was and how much she missed him. Without thinking, I walked to sit next to her on the couch. "Are things not going well?" I inquired gently, hoping to reach out. CLA offered me a sorrowful grin. "I'm trying, Logan. I truly am. But sometimes I wonder if it's enough or if we've gone too far." Despite everything, I felt a sense of pity for her. She was truly trying to work things out, but it was evident that her relationship with Thomas was strained. "I apologize," I said, reaching out to console her. When my palm contacted hers, I felt a surge of energy and intensity that terrified me. Claire must have felt it as well, as she hastily withdrew her hand away. "I should prepare supper," she muttered, her voice cracking as she dashed to the kitchen. I sat there with my heart beating. What was that? Why did I respond that strongly to such a simple touch? I retired to my room, my mind in turmoil. I had assumed we had moved on from everything and that we could put that night behind us. However, there were still unresolved sentiments simmering beneath the surface. That night, I stayed awake for hours, struggling with my conscience. I knew my emotions weren't right. Claire was my stepmother and my father's wife. But I couldn't ignore the attraction I had for her and how my body responded to her presence. I thought of Dad and how unaware he was of everything that was going on right in front of him. I thought of Claire, who was imprisoned in a failing marriage. And I thought of myself, caught in the midst of it all, perplexed and unprepared. As daylight dawned, I came to a conclusion. I couldn't continue to live this way, cautiously navigating my own home. I needed to get away and clear my brain. I started packing a suitcase, hoping that getting away from everything would help me figure things out, could stay with a buddy and finish my remaining few classes. As I zipped up my backpack, I heard activity in the corridor. CLA was up, presumably beginning her morning ritual. I took a deep breath, ready for the painful talk that was ahead. I had to inform her I was leaving and explain why. It wouldn't be easy, but it was necessary. After one last look around my room, I opened the door, prepared to face whatever was next. Little did I realize that the most painful portion of my odyssey lay ahead. As I walked into the hallway, rucksack draped over my shoulder, I almost collided with Claire. She was walking to the kitchen, still in her robe, her hair unkempt from sleep. When she spotted me, her eyes widened as she noticed my packed luggage and the resolute expression on my face. "Logan," she inquired, her voice tense and concerned. "What's happening?" I took a deep breath, preparing myself for the talk. "I'm leaving," I murmured, my voice firm despite the emotions coursing through me. "I believe it is better if I stay with a buddy for a bit." Claire's face sank as a mixture of comprehension and despair washed over her. "Logan," she said gently, "is this because of yesterday?" "Because of us." I nodded, but could not meet her look. "It isn't just yesterday. It is everything. I can't keep pretending everything is normal when it isn't, and I need some space to think things through." She stretched out as if to grasp my arm, but her hand dropped limply to her side. "I understand," she murmured gently, "but might we discuss this first? Dad will be crushed if you go without an explanation." In my haste to depart, I failed to think how this might hurt Dad. The weight of it all suddenly became overwhelming.